Now to the gallery, I do want to apologise for that. We obviously had a massive technical glitch that we still haven't been able to fix. Hopefully it will be fixed at some stage throughout the streaming, but in the meantime we will be filming on the camera and with the idea that it will be loaded up onto our media channels tomorrow, hopefully. So we will continue the meeting because we obviously don't want you guys waiting here forever, so sorry. So, councillors, item 9.1, do I have Councillor Cusack?
Deputy Mayor, I have an alternative motion to the one that is listed in the officer's recommendation. And I think it can be put up on the screen, but according to our usual form, I'll read it. The council issue a notice of decision to refuse to grant a permit in relation to planning permit application number MV63-/2017 for the use and development of the land as a food truck park, sale and consumption of liquor, access to a road zone, Category 1 road, and advertising signage at 454 470 Racecourse Road, Flemington. Landy PC 354437W, in accordance with the following grounds of refusal. 1. The proposal fails to appropriately respond to the policy directions contained within clause 22.04-3 policy of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme. 2. The proposal will have unacceptable safety impacts upon the surrounding roads in relation to traffic generation, pedestrian movements and access arrangements to and from the site. 3. The proposal will have an adverse effect on the residential amenity of the neighbouring land. 4. The proposed hours of operation are excessive and will have a detrimental effect on the amenity of the area. 5. The proposal for a liquor permit will escalate the already unacceptable antisocial behaviour of patrons attending events at the racecourse and showgrounds before and after these events. 6. The proposal does not adequately address the deleterious impact of noise generated by a continuous flow of patrons, the operation of the site and vans over a long period of time on residents. And 7. The proposal for a fast food truck park and liquor outlets in this part of Racecourse Road is inconsistent with Moonee Valley 2040, which seeks to promote a healthy city and the livability of residents through better planned neighbourhoods.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Do I have a second for the motion? Councillor Nation. Councillor Cusack, would you like to speak on the motion?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Well, just knock off a couple of facts first. Yes, this is in a commercial zone, and therefore it attracts applications of this sort. However, the history of this site is that while it's been actively used for commercial activities for many, many years, they've been of a 9 to 5 type of nature, and as a consequence of, while there might have been some times when there was an inconvenience on the neighbouring area and residents, they weren't of the magnitude of the type of issues that are going to arise as we look at this application. The application is located in a unique part of this municipality, and it's unique for many, many reasons. And I just try to paint some of those pictures. The area that is immediately affected by this application, the residential area, is comprised essentially of timber cottages. They're very much worthy of heritage consideration. We also have the very location very much dominated by two of Melbourne's premier events sources, both the racecourse and the showgrounds. And we all know that both of those places bring many, many people to Melbourne into this area and who enjoy themselves, but there's always a cost to the local area over it. And we also know that this is located on one of the most extraordinary corners in Melbourne, the junction of Smithfield Road and Racecourse Road has forever been one of great contention in this area, and I think amongst everybody who's ever driven towards the east or west sides of Melbourne before even any bridges were built. And finally, I suppose, what happens at that intersection is that we have an entrance into this area through Clarence Street on traffic lights. In the time that's left for me, I just would like to point out maybe point 1 stands on its very own, but in relation to point 2, we have trams, cars, pedestrians, bikes. We have the prospect of illegal turns over the tramway lines. We have confusion, potential confusion between people getting on and off trams, between people crossing the road, and between cars that come up Smithfield Road and turn into Racecourse Road and don't know exactly where they're going. There's many first-time drivers in and around that place. Also, we have trucks who are trying to redirect themselves in order not to get stuck under the railway bridge once again in Racecourse Road. In relation to 3, I'd like to make some of the following points. 100 patrons is planned for this site on a regular basis. Now that's not just 100 people coming down. They're planning, obviously, you wouldn't do this if you were just going to plate 100 small meals. You're going to be plating many, many hundreds of meals, and therefore you're going to have a turnover of patrons. So it's not just like a restaurant that has a seating for 2 or 3 hours. You're getting every half hour or so people turning over. Some will hang around for longer periods and so on like that. When I talk about the residential amenity, I'm also concerned that the cottages that are nearby, and there is in the gallery a sign that I've noted, and we do know that people will be living cheek to jowl with this development, and it is a significant issue. Remember also that in this neighbourhood there are no driveways. Everybody parks on the street. And so therefore we've got narrow streets, highly congested, and we've got everybody living very close, in close proximity to this site. The proposed hours are quite a problem. Mayor, I notice, Deputy Mayor, I notice the clock. Can I have a minute extension? Thank you. The proposal is for 7 days a week, so therefore nobody gets any respite from this sort of situation. It's silent on what it's doing around those key events that are building up or are already in existence around the area. And I note also, as I have in the motion before us, the before and after effect. This was a considerable concern when we looked at the Crown Street stables many years ago and what was being proposed there. So there is no way of managing this sort of thing, and therefore then it goes down to the next points after that about the escalating of unacceptable antisocial behaviour by patrons from events at the racecourse and showgrounds. People who attend these things are obviously coming out, they're light in spirit, they may have a lot of spirits, but they are not concerned about the neighbourhood, they are concerned about their personal good time. And if that happens to mean that residents get caught out in that space, it's going to be it's never a good thing. And also we have the potential risk is not just to the residents, not just to the physical property that they have around there that's concerned there, but there is also a risk to patrons. And if you've got, risk to people, patrons of the racecourse or showgrounds event. And if you're adding more alcohol to the situation, it'll be a problem. I'll try and close up very quickly here. So I can't possibly agree to 7 days a week, and I can't see how there's, in that process, any risk for residents. The proposal doesn't adequately address the deleterious impact of noise generated by a continuous flow of residents, the operation of the site, vans, over a long period of time. We had the Top Cut experience just down the road, where they had installed extractor fans and all that sort of stuff to so that they could make their new sources for all the food and all that sort of stuff. And it drove the people in Wisewood Street completely balmy. We've had to learn from that one about what this means for people who are living in a similar situation. And it's not fair, let alone anything to do with just. And so there's an issue in there. We know about the people who have had those sorts of impacts. Oh, sorry. And these are the same people who have had these sorts of impacts from the showgrounds, from the big day outs and all that sort of stuff. And we know that, so we've got to learn from that. And finally, in our own planning, we talk about creating neighbourhoods that are livable. We talk about neighbourhoods that are healthy. And 2040, our main piece of work that is underpinning all the direction of the future and planning for this municipality talks about how we need to make places livable. And by adding fast food and a further alcohol outlet to this area doesn't, in my mind, contribute one iota to that notion of livability and where we'll be in 2040. Thank
you. Councillor Nation, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm happy to support the refusal before us. In my opinion, there are some critical flaws with this application. Firstly, it's out of character with the area, which at first glance might seem a little bit odd, given it sits on an extremely busy intersection. However, this is not the entertainment end of Racecourse Road, and there's a marked difference between what lies east of Newmarket Plaza and what lies west. East of Newmarket Plaza, you have a nighttime precinct, you have food premises, you have liquor premises, you have businesses operating 7 days a week. West of Newmarket Plaza, you have an aged care facility, a child care facility, a self-access gym, a bicycle store, a dog groomer, a high school, and a large residential precinct. The businesses operating west of Newmarket Plaza are what I call daytime businesses. This application is the complete opposite. This application looks to put 9 o'clock finishing time, or a 9 o'clock closing time from Monday to Thursday, 10 o'clock Friday, 10 o'clock Saturday, and then I think again 9 o'clock Sunday. So it activates this end of Racecourse Road as the entertainment precinct is at the moment. Now, the categorical difference is the amount of residents that live around this site. As Councillor Cusack mentioned, you've got Clarence and Glance Street, which are predominantly single-fronted Victorian properties. They weren't built to sustain an application such as this, and they probably weren't even built to sustain vehicular traffic because some of them date back over 100 years. There's a laneway that's immediately north of this site, and the walls on the edge of the laneway are the walls of properties that border the laneway. And the idea in this report that the laneway provides a satisfactory buffer is not at all appreciating the dynamics of this site and the dynamics of the residential properties that lie up Clarence and Glance Street. As Councillor Cusack mentioned, this application is for 100 patrons on site at a time. Not 100 patrons for the whole day, 100 patrons on the site, or up to 100 patrons on the site, 7 days a week. Add to that the traffic implications around the site, which even without this application is an area under stress from increasing traffic numbers. Clarence, Glance, Marshall Street are all streets with extremely limited parking, and after 5 o'clock at night, as I witnessed myself last Wednesday, these streets can be extremely difficult to negotiate. The application has 13 parking spaces. Now, when you take into account that there could be up to 6 food trucks, sorry, I'm asking for a brief extension, when you think there's going to be 6 different food truck operators, all with different staff, plus the liquor facility, the staff won't even be able to get a park on site with only 13 parking spots. So then you think about all the traffic implications that will come from people not just parking in those side streets, but looking for parks, going in and out of the site, making that left turn into Marshall and getting stuck and having to do a U-turn, or Grant Street, which very timely had a truck stuck in it today trying to drop off a delivery of gas bottles on the site. I'll wrap it up. I could talk about issues with liquor on the premises. I could talk about issues that the area already has with events at Flemington and the showgrounds. I could talk about issues of noise and light spillage. I could talk about issues with waste management, the collection and the noise. I could talk about issues with patrons leaving after 10 o'clock at night, and even the lack of a loading zone for deliveries. This proposal is not at all responsive to the area. As Councillor Cusack mentioned, it is not in line with the core fundamentals of our guiding document, Moonee Valley 2040. In my opinion, is a completely flawed application.
Would any other councillors like to speak on the item? Councillor Lawrence?
Thank you. This is an interesting application in that it provides what we would consider to be normal food and alcohol all in one neat package. But I think that's where the neat package finishes and becomes a little bit more messy. This is not your regular food van situation at a football club or other parking venue throughout the municipality where we have food trucks. This is looking to have a permanent food truck park in an area that probably didn't ask for it in the first place, and certainly, from what I can gather, doesn't want it. And that's where this begins and finishes in my book and in my opinion. The 13 car parking spaces, as Councillor Nation alluded to, for 100 patrons, well, who's going to sit back and count the patrons for a start and find out that there's 102 or 120 or 130? The point being that 13 car parking spaces do not fit in 100 people. They're going to have to park somewhere, and they're going to end up parking probably in side streets, and the effect of that, of course, is going to be very detrimental to the local amenity and to the local people who live in that part of Flemington. Having lived in Flemington myself for 5 or 6 years, a long time ago, I know how much this area is treasured by those that live there, and it is a great area to live, but we don't want to see it destroyed. And this type of intrusive food van setup, in my opinion, should be seen as a more family-friendly situation, but I think the hours that it's extended to, the alcohol aspect to it, changes it from that type of place that would be family-friendly to more of a nighttime party atmosphere that is being presented by the application. Throw in the other issues of light spill, and I do read that there isn't too much light being impacted, which I'm not sure how that's going to really work, but loud music, amplified music in itself, excited patrons maybe coming back from other events, then you end up with a lot of impact noise-wise on your local area, and that's an issue that people, particularly in, say, Glaze Street, have to put up with, and one that's unfairly imposed on them. If we look at the excess parking and the fact that that's going to have parking problems, they're bound to try side streets to park to stay at this venue or to go to the venue. And we're going to have illegal parking problems. We're going to have block streets. Glade Street is a one-way street, a narrow street for a start, not a one-way street, a dead-end street already, and it's going to cause problems. Just maybe half a minute extension. So overall, the local amenity of the area will be seriously compromised, and with cars from the food park coming and going and that sort of noise aspect, it does have a serious safety aspect to the whole operation, and I support the alternative motion and cannot support the application. Thank you.
Just quickly, I'd just like to concur with my fellow councillors, and I'd like to thank all the residents who contacted me via email. I have literally been swamped with emails regarding this proposal. I haven't been able to get back to you all. You can only imagine how many I've received, but I thank you for that. Your concerns have certainly been read and taken into account, and happy to support this alternative motion by Councillor Cusack.
Councillor Gautam-Ritchie, you're okay? Okay, thank you. Councillor Cusack, would you like to close?
Yes, if I can do so, Deputy Mayor. I think there's a couple of really important issues in this. It's a terrible shame that this applicant didn't sit down and have a conversation with council and the community beforehand. Yet there are wonderful opportunities for people to be involved and to create something really interesting on that site, and not to have taken advantage of the opportunity to pick the minds of other people is a great shame. And I suspect that they won't be happy with the outcome that I'm hoping for in the next couple of minutes. But if it transpires that way, I'd really like to encourage them to sit down and actually start that conversation and discourse with us. This is a classic case where the community benefit is marginal at the very best, but it is seriously outweighed by the problems that it creates. And we have had some experience now as a council, not just from the point of view of what happens in this area with events and all the rest of it, but we also have our own other truck park at Mount Alexander Road, which did go through a process of very serious community consultation, but it was not, and with all the best efforts in place, it didn't work as well as everybody had hoped, and it certainly had created problems for the residents. But with the conversations that we're able to have, the fact that there was a discourse there, we're able to change things. Now, it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but change has occurred. I don't see why we should have to actually establish something like this, but then have a massive amount of problems, and then go around trying to fix it up with little band-aids all over the place. It's never going to work. There's no point, as somebody said to me the other day, you can't put lipstick on the pig. It's still going to be a pig. So we might as well knock it on the head, ask people to sit down and in the cool light of day, have a serious think about it, and come back to us with a decent proposal. If not, well, we'll see what other avenues come up.
Thank you. Yeah, to the vote, all those in favour? Carried unanimously.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you, councillors.
Council report 9.2 on tonight's agenda is on page 27 and relates to a planning application at 492 and 494 Pascal Road, Strathmore. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Kim.
I'd like to move the officer's recommendation with an additional point at 17.
Sure, would you like to read that?
Yes, and the additional point at 17 is just the food and drink premises must not be used as a restaurant. on the face of it, this is not a small development, but when we look at the site and where it is, and we look at the fact that it's really a dead zone within the area at the moment, if we're going to encourage some more dense housing in suburbs, this is the type we want to see. There's very limited residential impacts as it doesn't interface many properties. It's heavily accessible to public transport at the train station. It's on a main road. The design is non-offensive, but particularly it activates the Moonee Creek interface with a cafe. Certainly, I had some concerns around parking and the hours of operation of the premises, both of which have been addressed through permit conditions. And in terms of the permit conditions, it's probably worth mentioning it's actually really heavily conditioned. So certainly, along with all of those conditions, it now has a high level of compliance. And importantly for us, it's a really nice way to be able to activate the bike path. I think that's reflected in a significant number of access bike parks on the site. Certainly, I think that for us to be able to see something on that site rather than a vacant block is a good outcome. So.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I generally concur with my Ward Councillor, Councillor Gauchi. 82 dwellings, 14 one-bedders, 68 two-bedders, on a site that's well over 3,000 square metres. It's giving 121 car parking spaces. It is a big site, it's a big development, and it's probably one of the biggest in our ward that I can think of over the time that I've been councillor anyway. And it is, as Councillor Gauchi mentioned, in a dead space on Pascoe Road. This is not an area that's really, other than being a car yard, which is probably what it was years ago, it's been pretty vacant for a long time. There is a chicken place of some description close by and a car wash, but really that area down there is dead space and it needs some vibrancy added to it. If we throw in the fact that this will also bring considerable employment benefits to the area, including not just the construction side, of course, which will bring many hundreds of jobs both on-site and for the contractors off-site, but it will also bring the 7 ongoing catering jobs with the small business that will be the cafe on the Moonee Creek. The development has many conditions, and this is something that I was very taken by. There's 66 endorsed conditions, plus a further 15 environmental conditions. This is including sub-clauses, of course. A further 33 development conditions. City West have 3 water conditions, Eston Airport conditions, Melbourne Water 11 conditions, Vic Roads 9 conditions, and then throw in our own Moonee Valley City Council extra permit notes, and this becomes a very controlled and conditioned development in an area that is sensitive. I mean, we've got Moonee Creek behind it, and so it abuts up there to the east. The site, as I mentioned, is dead space near the Tulla Freeway, so it's been rejuvenated. It'll have little impact on the neighbours that are around there because most of them are commercial anyway, and as stated, the employment to the local area. It meets the res codes, and it meets the appropriate degree of change and growth for this area, including substantial setbacks. So I would recommend it to my fellow councillors.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors? Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just quickly, certainly happy to support my fellow ward councillors. I think that this development will become an asset in that area, actually. As Councillor Lyons mentioned, it's certainly a large site and has been vacant for quite some time. So I'm keen to see how it does develop, and I like how the actual building sort of tapers around the creek there. I think it will look very nice, and it will sit well within its environs there on Pascoe Road. So I'm certainly happy to support it, and I also must thank Councillor Gauci and Moranci for the addition of the food and drink premises must not be used as a restaurant, because I just think that that adds just a little bit of protection, I guess, against operations at the bottom of the dwelling, you know, maybe going past normal hours or the rest of it. So just being a food and drink premises and excluding the option as a restaurant is certainly a good idea. So thank you, Councillor Gauci.
Councillor, any other councillor? Councillor Cusack.
Just a couple of quick observations. First of all, I'm very pleased that there are significant landscaping and other environmental conditions applied to this particular development. It's one that is, while the location is in a very odd place, and on the other side of the freeway, heading up towards Gaffney Street, and that tiny little bit that is actually still falls within the boundaries of this council. It's actually located on in a space where there is a potential to have great advances in the future. The cafe being oriented towards the bike path allows a natural stopping off point, and hopefully all we need to do then is make sure we get the bike path built properly and develop all that stuff in a sound way, and of course the remediation of the Moonee Ponds Creek becomes a real important issue up there and along the rest of its course. But this development takes on something that is a bit different, and hopefully we might have got ourselves a model in this space to work properly.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Any other councillor say a few words? Councillor Gauci, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously.
Can you?
Sorry.
There's
no questions here.
No, I just want clarification.
There are no questions. No questions. Councillors, Councillor report on 9.3 on tonight's agenda is on page 59 and relates to reviewing statutory planning protocols. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to move that we refer this item to next ordinary council meeting.
Defer it? Okay, that's fine. We will defer 9.3. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cusack, need to speak to the item.
In light of the survey that came back, which was new and added to this report, and the fact that the PAC meeting hasn't seen it yet, and it is quite new information. I know this has been deferred before, but I think that it is so important to get this right that holding it off for a fortnight, considering two councils are missing.
Councillor Cusack, would you like to say a few words? Or?
No, Mayor, I'll just leave it stand as it is.
Any other councillor? Councillor Moonee, would you like to close? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Council report 9.4 on tonight's agenda is on page 71 and relates to an events and festival review. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to move the officer's recommendation.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Gauci. Councillor Burke, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Events and Festivals Review was undertaken to ensure the delivery of events and festivals continue to meet the needs of our community and address our strategic objectives, particularly to ensure a neighbourhood-based approach. Key change, there was identified that there are 115 separate events that we hold in Moonee Valley annually. Throughout this, throughout mapping these events, one thing that wouldn't come to any surprise to you, being in Rose Hill Ward, was that some neighbourhoods in Moonee Valley are receiving fewer event activations, while others are heavily programmed with council events. For example, Moonee Ponds sees 38% of all events in the municipality, whereas areas such as Strathmore, Airport West, Newbury, Essendon West receive less than 2%. No civic events were held outside of Moonee Ponds. It's important to note that this data does not account for any community events delivered within the municipality. It is on page 77 on the appendices, a nice little map of how many events are held in each area. It's quite clear that it is not spread quite evenly. So I suppose with this review and recommendations, there are quite a few key changes, which are important, and they're not necessarily going to be loved by all. There's probably a way to put it, but just to highlight some of them. Transitioning the planning and delivery of events to place-based neighbourhoods approach in line with MBO 2040, which I'm assuming will speak on. Decentralising the Moonee Valley Festival and transitioning to a neighbourhood-based model with various events held throughout the city over a number of days or weeks. Improving access to grant funding for community-run events by establishing a separate funding substream for events and festivals, targeting funding for celebrating certain dates of recognition and small neighbourhood activations. Combining the Spirit of Moonee Valley Awards event with the citizenship ceremony held on the 26th of January to jointly acknowledge new and outstanding citizens in a more efficient way. Expanding the Carols in Queen's Park event to accommodate extra community group exposure and holding the event on a Saturday evening rather than a Sunday afternoon, much more kid-friendly. And improving access to council permits by creating easier and streamlined online processes and providing better support for community delivering events and festivals. We didn't come up with this just by drawing these things out of the hat. There was consultation that happened, obviously through the MB 2040 process. There were postcards that were sent out to many people and everyone who contributed to MB 2040. One of the questions on the postcards was, what events and celebrations would you like to see in your neighbourhood? There's a whole list of them, from suggested events, suggested themes and suggested occasions. Some new ones which sound exciting, including New Year's Eve. Not necessarily sure who will work at those ones, but it would be good to see something like that in the municipality. Whilst we have a small leisure pack group, it did also come to the pack, to the leisure pack, and there was some really valuable input there. Some of the input there was more about, not about having huge events all the time that cost, well, Moonee Valley Festival, for example, costs over $200,000 a year to run. It's about having small street performers at areas that are already activated, such as Flemington Market and whatnot, and creating events that are, you know, they should be easy to do, and we don't do that well here yet. I do recommend everyone have a bit of a look at the events and how much they cost, and I think this was a really good review because it shows that a lot of our great events don't necessarily cost heaps to run. And whilst some people might say that the transition out of having Queen's Park for the Moonee Valley Festival might ruffle a few feathers, I'm sure it will always be looked at as a popular event. And I still remember the Essendon Festival down at the river, and we are transitioning back to the river. And I think we've got to give some things a go sometime. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor? Oh, sorry, Councillor.
Thank you. I would like to say something. Certainly, as Samantha mentioned, we run Councillor Burton mentioned, we run a very diverse range of events. So this review ensures that we continue to do that, but in a way that's meaningful and engaging for our local neighbourhood communities. The 2040 strategy gave us a really good platform to engage with small communities in our neighbourhoods, and from that, things like the Strathmore Street Party that have occurred show that people want to play and interact with their local neighbourhood environments and within their 20-minute neighbourhood. Certainly for me, several years ago now, but part of the reason I ran for council was there was a food truck, I know that's not the most loved word right tonight, but a food truck festival of sorts at Woodlands Park several years ago, and it was a couple of food trucks, a band, and in effect some portable toilets at Woodlands Park. But I decided I wanted to run for council partly because of planning stuff, and then partly because I wanted to see more of those local events where I was able to go out with my neighbours. We walked down there together, we had a twilight picnic in the park together, and that's the sort of stuff that we get the best feedback from. Things like Valley Vibes, the ice skating in Pratt Street, which 5,000 people have so far skated at. The things that we do that are targeted in small communities, we get such good feedback from. So certainly We have had feedback over my couple of years on council about carols being on a Saturday night, not a school night, Sunday night, and about the fact that Moonee Valley Festival is great, but it's not working the way it should at the moment, and that's something that we need to rethink. In terms of the support for community groups to run events in their own neighbourhoods was something I was really pleased to see. And the improved Spirit of Moonee Valley Festival is a really nice way for us to be able to engage new residents on Australia Day with some of our most celebrated residents on the same day, and then to see what they could particularly aspire to if they wanted to in a couple of years' time. Certainly, I'm really pleased to see the review, and I look forward to seeing all the different local events that happen.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor say a few words? Councillor Cusack. Community events, festivals and the likes are about celebrating our municipality, all of the people who live here and the people who enjoy our community. We have successes, we have some failures, we have stuff that happens in between. But festivals and events are about engaging and connecting with people. It is not just about what council thinks. They are first and foremost about what the local community wants and does. But to be able to make some sense of that, we've had to unpack it somewhat and to create a plan to go forward. As I think it was whoever moved the motion, or maybe it was Councillor Gasmarucci, mentioned 115 or 100 whatever there is types of festivals. We need to think a bit about those and what impact they're having. I look at how festivals grow in local places and become major movements, and those major movements are driven by what the community wants and how the community can actually harness their own resources and their own capacities. And we have a wonderful example of that now in the planning that's going ahead for the Flemington Community Festival that is due in October, where without even thinking, without even trying to do anything, we've got over 30 different activities all happening within a fortnight. And it's all being driven very much at the base, what's happening on the footpaths of Flemington, Ascot Vale, and God love the people in Kensington too. So it's that sort of thing that is great. I was in a shop in Puckle Street the other day, and I was looking at the wall. I'd just come down from looking at the ice skating, which has been such a boom, and 4,000 odd bookings in the first couple of days is just off the planet. But I walked into this shop and it was doing good business, but the only stuff that is in the rack that's in this shop is about stuff that seems to be happening in Hobson's Bay, and the biggest things that were carried there were the brochures and pamphlets for its literary festival, which has been going for 15 years. Now, I remember going to the first festivals down there. They were just walk-ins off the road, down at the Strand, where people were doing things in shops and just reading pieces and so on like that. And now it's well recognised. They have thousands of authors. No, too much. Serious exaggeration there, but many, many, many famous authors go to that. And in its own small way, is like the West's Writers' Festival to rival anything on a national basis. So we can do this sort of stuff in our neighbourhoods if we actually think and work and trust our communities. And now we've got something of a comprehensive plan.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor say a few words? Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My biggest fear with changes of this nature are throwing out the baby with the bathwater. And by that I mean we've had a very long established Moonee Valley Festival, and it needs a bit of tweaking. I would be the first to agree with that, and it's very well established as the Hobson's Bay Literary Festival is, and you build up reputations. They take a long time to get there. It's not an overnight sensation. It takes many, many years, and I'm just trying to remember how many years we've had the Moonee Valley Festival. 40 years, thank you for that, which is no mean feat for any local council. council, especially one in an urban part of Melbourne. So, sure, it's got its drawbacks and it's got problems in certain areas, but it also is a focus for the entire municipality. It's not just a 20-minute neighbourhood festival. It's one that draws everybody from every part of the municipality into, okay, it happens to be in Moonee Ponds, I grant you that, but that's where Queen's Park is. So it is a great festival, and in some ways we can probably reduce it or change it or modify it, but I'd hate to lose it. And that's what I'm reading in this report, that potentially it's going to be altered and we're going to end up with something down along the boulevard, which is a great location too, don't get me wrong, but it isn't the traditional Moonee Valley Festival that is 40 years plus, and a lot of people in Moonee Valley love and look forward to that every year, and it would be a great loss to this municipality, as I'm sure those councillors who have been here a lot longer than I have would attest to, and would pay some respect to that very fact that the community does love that festival, even though it has its problems, but it also brings in the volunteer side of our community, and it's not just about commercialisation. There is more to it. So I'm sorry to be focusing just on that, but it just, to me, it looked like we were. This report seems to be, let's say, semi-biased towards smaller festivals, and look, that we have some great little festivals within our municipality that are needed and certainly enjoyed. I, for one, was up at the Strathmore one only the other week and found it very enjoyable. But it's niche, and that's exactly what they're designed for, and that's good. Whereas Moonee Valley Festival is designed for the whole of the municipality. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors say a few words? I'll say a few words as well. I remember the Moonee Valley Festival many years ago when Frank Blasey, one of our local residents out of Dale Heights, actually brought up the idea of having a Moonee Valley Festival 40 years ago. And it's been running along quite well, and I do share your concerns, Councillor Collins, about, maybe this is what the community wants all the time. But sometimes you've got to try something new, and I think spreading it over the weekend in different places like down the Boulevard and at Queen's Park, look, that's how it used to happen before, as Councillor Burns said. So we're going back to the future, basically, sort of thing. And we're also sort of like, and when you look at the spirit of Moonee Valley as well, we're going to combine it with the Australia Day ceremony, like Councillor Goucher said. Look, it's something new, something innovative. Let's see how it works out. And we're also going back to the old format of how we do the spirit. We're not going to have a sit-down dinner. We're going to go back to having a theatre where we can actually, invite a lot more people, a lot more community to the actual spirit, rather than having it just a small number of people on a sit-down dinner. So, look, we're trying. Look, if it doesn't work out, we'll have a look at it again, we'll review it again, and like I said, I share everyone's concerns, but I see positive and negatives in this whole report. So, Councillor Bird, would you like to close?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I think you hit the nail on the head with a lot of things. We're giving this a go. At the moment, we're spending over $200,000 on one festival in February. If it's a 40-degree day, we lose a quarter of our funding effectively for our events for the year, over a quarter, and it makes it very difficult. But I just thought that I'd bring up in the appendices, it does speak about Moonee Valley Festival, and we're not getting rid of Moonee Valley Festival. What we're doing is we're decentralising it so that there will be three type events, three centralised events, and this is on page 93 for people who want to have a look. So redesign the Moonee Valley Festival to deliver a series of place-based events throughout our neighbourhoods over a number of days. So instead of just having one event on a Sunday, we'll have three events probably over the 3 days. And it says in 2019 this will include 3 Valley Vibe-sized events across the walls with the central event at the Maribyrnong River. So as we touched on before, we had This is how it used to be. So we can still have, if we're having it in the different wards, we can still have something at Queen's Park. We're not crossing it off the list and saying we're never doing an event at Queen's Park. It's quite the opposite. We're saying probably our second biggest event, or maybe third biggest event that we run, is Carols, and that's 8 weeks before Moonee Valley Festival. Let's spread the love. We've got a beautiful Maribel River. Let's use it for a different event. And as you've said, if it doesn't quite work out, this is what the reviewers recommended, but if it doesn't work out, we can always go back. It's not like we're breaking our tradition of having a Moonee Valley Festival. We're absolutely having a Moonee Valley Festival. It's just going to be slightly different. And I think that it'll be better, and I think that the community will really appreciate us getting with the times.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillors, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously.
Council Report 9.5 on tonight's agenda is on page 79 and relates to Community Funding Program Review and Policy. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Nation.
Happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cusack. Councillor Nation, would you like to speak to the item?
I will, and we'll try to do so briefly because this has come to us a number of times, and it's quite a positive that it's come to us a number of times because this community funding policy is an evolving beast, and it's something that Council undertook in towards the end of our previous term to have a thorough look at how we invest money back into the community, into community groups, and ultimately gain that net community benefit from that spend. In this council term, we will spend close to $2 million through our community funding program, and that's over a range of different methods, be it community grants, service subsidies, sponsorship, etc. This review is basically a 2 years in stock take of where we're at and a look at how we can continue to develop this policy to ensure we're getting the best community dividend. There's 21 recommendations in this report that have come through an auditor's review, an evaluation and community feedback, and they're outlined, I think, from page number 95 onwards, and they're just things that Council has learnt over the time about how we can continue to develop this policy and this program to ensure that our money is well spent, that it is being delivered to the right groups, that we're not making obtaining council funds or grants too difficult, and picking up on our events and festivals review that was just moved previously. One of the recommendations in this report is to look at that idea of neighbourhood festivals and events, and providing a funding stream for those sort of events. So I commend the team that behind the scenes have been developing this policy. It has been a huge amount of work dating back to those days where councillors would have their own funds that they would dish out. It's a transparent process, and I think it will be something that we continue to develop to ensure that we as council invest back into our community and get that real net community benefit.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cusack.
Thank you, Mayor. I think the most important reason that I support this motion is the fact that we've got a transparent process, and what has happened in the past with all the best intentions under the sun, and this is the process of iteration and experience going on here. We've basically had most of this model in place for the last few years, but nobody's been able to talk about what it looks like. And yet, if you go to page 81 of our papers now, you've got a lovely little table there that sets it out very easily. In the old test of being able to do the 30-second elevator conversation to explain what this is about, we've actually got something that equates to that. And hopefully this will mean that community groups who want to participate in our community, who want to develop and be part of who want to be part of the development and growth of our community, and who we should be encouraging and really actively encouraging to do things, because they do extraordinary work that gives us a multiplier effect many times over. We've got a way of actually showing them what's what and how quickly it can be done and when to expect it. And I know that Councillor Nation over time has raised things like, the vouchers and donations and sponsorships, which are often forgotten, but they are actually mechanisms by which council can salt a good idea or reward good effort and make things happen for our community. And so I commend this motion to you. I think it's got excellent possibilities, and I just wish that as our community expands, that we will continue to grow the quantum dollar that's involved in this. One of the more interesting things is that we have finally achieved something in this that I know was pet of Councillor Lawrence's, which is to separate some of the business stuff out, so businesses actually can be compared to businesses in terms of actually making applications, and that people who are doing stuff on the basis of cultural and other things are being compared in that space. And big grants aren't necessarily what everybody needs. People just need things that get them going. I'm reminded of the food project down in Flemington that is run totally voluntarily by many, many people. It has no constitution. It has no office bearers. But Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, they are putting out 30 to 40 to 50 meals a day, feeding lots and lots of people and doing it for nothing. They've had one fundraiser in all that time. Otherwise, it's just been donations from the local community.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor like to say a few words? Councillor Lawrence.
Only very briefly, Mr Mayor, and thank you for the opportunity. The change in this whole grant system is terrific, and I thank Councillor Cusack for his comment on business. It does separate everybody out into different areas, and we're not confusing the different requests for different types of funding, and that's critical when you're trying to deal with someone from a particular service club as opposed to a swimming club, as opposed to a business who's just wanting a bit of a leg up to run a program. It's good. It gives clarity to the community that we represent, and I think that's important too. There's been confusion in the past as to what can and cannot get grants, and maybe there was some favouritism from certain councillors when that system operated, which is going back some time, and I'm not accusing anybody in this room of anything relating to that, of course. This was just the process that we had, as Councillor Nation pointed out, that the councillors had their own little stash, but now it's all out in the open. Everybody gets a say in it, and it's transparent, and there can be no confusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor say a few words? Councillor Nation, would you like to close?
I will just briefly to outline how the biannual responsive and partnership grants have been broken up for this next financial year. The biannual grants will now come in 4 funding streams, being community up to $20,000, business up to $20,000, events and festivals, which I touched on before, up to $20,000, and that important social support grant, which wasn't in the first version of this policy, but Councillor Cusack definitely argued for its implementation, and that's up to $1,500 for those small community groups, your play groups, your elderly citizens groups who just want to have an outing or want their tea and coffee provided for the year. And that's not something that you can necessarily match against the criteria that would score really highly, but it is such an important way of keeping members of the community engaged and participating. There's the responsive grants, which now, rather than lumping them all in together, are split up into the individual participation, the neighbourhood activation, which we touched on in the previous report, the donations and the vouchers, And then the final stream is the partnership grants, which were previously called service subsidies, which was quite a convoluted name. The partnership grants are in essence exactly that. They're organisations coming to council, partnering with council to help provide a service that council might not currently provide, that might be in need, and council working together with these organisations again to deliver that net community benefit. So I'm really impressed at how this has evolved, and once again commend the team behind the scenes for continuing to develop this to ensure we have the best possible community funding program.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillors, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Council Report 9.6 on tonight's agenda is on page 115 and relates to Alma Street, Aberfeldy, interim and permanent heritage controls. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Lawrence.
Just move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Cusack. Councillor Lawrence, would you like to speak to the item?
Only very briefly, Mr Mayor, this is a fairly self-evident report and endorses Council's previous interim position. The Heritage Gap study of 2014 is what it's based on, and the significant study that was, that has a positive impact on protecting places of historical significance in the Moonee Valley City Council. There's minor changes that are in from the previous report that came to Council, and that specifically relates to the garage in one case, and also a 4 metre distance from the current residence, which isn't included in the heritage listing. So those 3 points are tabled there, and it's fairly self-explanatory, as I said. But it's great to see that the council is continuing on this path of trying to uphold our heritage and retain it, not just for the current generation, but for generations to come. And I can only hope that will continue for future councils, because once it's gone, we can never get it back. And there's been enough demolition of wonderful properties that we'll never see again in all parts of the municipality, particularly the older parts of Eston and Moonee Ponds, Ascot Vale, Flemington. And that has to be retained at all costs. So we just have to be very mindful of that. I don't like to see these type of changes put into a recommendation that's already gone to the minister, but obviously there was reason that they chose to want these changes, but it doesn't impact on the demolition of the property, thank goodness. It does affect the garage, but I don't think there's too much in the garage that we need to be too troubled about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cusack.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm aware that Councillor Sharp was keen to second this motion, and I dropped in on her and I didn't mean to. But I suppose in seconding this motion, a couple of reflections. One is that even with the best intentions, when we do identify places within our heritage studies and so on like that, slips can occur. And this site has come within a whisker of being demolished because we weren't able to move quickly enough to beat an application to demolish and so on like that. However, with all of the best effort of our staff and so on like that, we've been able to turn that around and make something of it. So this motion is important from that point of view, and the intrinsic value of that property at 5 Alma Street. But I think it's a salient reminder that we have many, many properties, as Councillor Lawrence has pointed out, in our municipality that are of equal significance, and that 1A, that we need to be diligent in making sure that they are protected, and B, that we really keep working hard through this long-term plan that we've had around heritage through the gap studies into the phase that we're in now, and keep picking up these properties, and do that and have that complemented by the environmental stuff that we're doing in respect of our significant trees and the likes of that, because our neighbourhoods are identified. This municipality is identified by its neighbourhoods that are green and leafy. It is something special out in this part of the western suburbs and the northwest suburbs of Melbourne, and is not something that is there by mistake. It's there because it was put there, and it was there because people have actually taken the time to think about it. And that's the importance of the heritage and why this is such an important piece of work that's gone on.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor like to say a few words? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I actually hesitated whether I wanted to even move or second this motion, actually, because basically this report, we've gone through the process of having an interim heritage overlay put over this site, then we've gone to the panel. Now, the panel is effectively saying in this report, now keep in mind that we're looking at a corner site here, corner of Alma Street and Beaver Street, a very prominent corner. The panel effectively are saying that the garage wall, although we have insisted that the garage wall should be part of the heritage significance, the panel has dismissed that along with making a note that from the main, I'll read it out, reference should be made to in the citation to distinguish the land to the rear of the main house beyond 4 metres south of the gutter line of the main roof, which to me means that the little tack-on a lot of heritage places and older places have, and the name of it eludes me, but the little tack-on that you have past the main roof line effectively is not part of the heritage significance of the building.
Just for clarity, I think it's called a lean-to.
Thank you. That is it. Thank you very much.
What's it called, Councillor?
Lean-to.
A lean-to.
A lean-to.
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 It's a little tack-on that used to happen very often. Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. So basically, from the main roof line of the house to the extent to the backyard is not included in this heritage overlay. So picture what will happen. A wall will go up right against, just past the main wall of the building, and the backyard will be developed. So I've got concerns with how this is all going to play out, because the whole idea of this was to protect the heritage value of the house. If you develop the backyard of a heritage home, what do you think is going to happen to the value of that, to the heritage significance of that house? To my mind, it's going to be diminished, because it is not the way that the house is effectively not the way that it stood for all this time. So I understand that the panel has made its decision, but for me, I really think that it is diminishing the whole heritage significance of this place. It is truly a magnificent building. Like I said, it's a grand home on a significant corner. So to have the panel come back and say effectively, you can, and that's what will happen. Effectively, you can develop the backyard. I don't know whether I can. The problem is for me, if I don't support this motion, I'm not supporting the heritage on the building. But if I do support it, yes, I'm supporting the heritage. But what significance will that house have if the backyard's developed? So, yes, that's my concern, and I'm torn. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor like to say a few words?
Can I just ask a point of clarification on what the size of the backyard is? I'm trying to look through the appendices, but I can't. Is it even going to be big enough to put dwellings on? Through you, Mr Mayor, it would seem that the panel recommendation has been written with that in mind, and that's Councillor Sharp's point.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Any other councillor like to say a few words? Councillor Lawrence, would you like to close?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, taking Councillor Sharp's point, it's difficult to heritage list land, I guess, at the end of the day, and that is the dilemma we're faced with, or I'm assuming that's where the panel's come to its decision, and it may not be, it may be, but I take your point, and it is something that we have no control over ultimately. As a council, it's something that the panel decided, and we're left with the result of that decision. I guess it hasn't changed my overall opinion that we have to retain these heritage buildings. This is a significant building in the Aberfeldy part of our ward, Buckley Ward, and that's something that I would hate to see demolished, whether the land around it is not listed as part of that package. At least we're retaining the building that is what we're really trying to protect, and that's what I would feel strongly about. I guess we can go further down the planning track and say, should there be further construction or development done on the backyard or the land that surrounds the building, then it has to have some conditions that it meets in terms of its building design and how it fits in with the local character of that area, which of course is going to be related to the heritage listed building on the corner. So that would be my only avenue of trying to ensure that the area stays as it should. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. 9.7 on tonight's agenda is on page 118 and relates to East Timor Program Review. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Cusack.
Mayor, I'd like to move the motion in line with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Do I have a seconder? Councillor Byrne. Councillor Cusack, would you like to speak to the item?
Mayor, our council has had a long relationship with East Timor since the bitter days of 1999, when this country sought its independence from, or voted to be independent from, Indonesia. Many of us followed on the front pages of the paper the disaster that happened after that, and the tragic loss of life. Somewhat estimated at over 250,000 people died in that whole process. We saw and know that there were many parts of East Timor basically ransacked and left without any mechanisms by which surviving people could even have any sort of life. We know that the country has predominantly a very young population. We know that the country has gone through extraordinary stresses over the last 18 years to move it towards a strong democracy. At times in that process, it has nearly fallen over. There was a coup in 2006, there was assassination attempts and so on like that. But still, it has struggled on. Moonee Valley, through its relationship with Likasar, has been a significant contributor to that community. We've installed solar panels. We have, through our NGOs that we work with in partnership, have provided support to mothers, expectant mothers, and we've also established a new and growing IT support business that is a cooperative that is winning small contracts throughout all of East Timor, both for training and also for the development of networks that people need. So, main example being the police in the area. But with that change that is occurring in East Timor, and the changes that have occurred within our own community over the 18 years, there has been somewhat of a divergence of effort of what's required. And so this proposal in front of us realigns where council is. And it gives us the opportunity to have a think about sort of how do we move on and still support and maintain our commitment to East Timor that we signed only a few years ago with representatives from Nicassar and is proudly displayed on the wall of this council chamber. How do we do that in a world where we're not using the outcomes of the race meeting and so on like that? So council's being asked through option 2 to provide two things. One is the $2,000 grant per year, which will also be supplemented through other fundraising things such as the sale of East Timorese coffees and so on like that. And maybe we might just make that a wholesale change across the whole of the council with a bit of luck. But then we also have other partnerships with other communities in the municipality who are not just focusing on Nicassar but have a broader view, and we would like to partner with those. The other thing that we're looking for and seeking support from the council is to allocate some resource to making that actually work. You can't just establish something and not put any boots on the ground. So we need that as part of what this option 2 is. But option 2 will also, help us to maintain our commitments, as I said earlier. It also will grow and strengthen where there has been a vacuum, our connections back to that community. It will also work better with opportunities that are coming out of the state government, which has for a number of years now, where irrespective of the people who are occupying the front benches of the government benches of Spring Street, have always shown bipartisan support for the East Timorese initiatives, and how we can work better with other councils and other friendship groups to actually strengthen what we're doing. So I'm asking you to support this recommendation and to consider that this is not just something that is happening in a bubble, but that in fact our community of Moonee Valley gains a lot from this, and that of course the spin-off is the East Timorese community, both in the Broad and also in Nicassar.
Thank you. Councillor Byrne, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll be brief because Councillor Cusack, as always when speaking on this matter, always takes his full allocation of time and speaks very well. But no, I think that this is something that I've ummed and ahed with about, and I'm still not necessarily convinced on the coffee bean side of things, but I really like the process that's been put in place, and to have a formal agreement with lots of benefactors of this. As Councillor Cusack says, people in East Timor will benefit, people in Moonee Valley and the wider community will benefit as well. And I just think having it through the grant stream makes it a bit cleaner as well. I did want to note for people who haven't read it, we obviously used to do a fundraiser at the Moonee Valley Racecourse to raise money for this. However, and I can see your face, but I think in terms of where council sits with responsible gambling and the development at the Moonee Valley Racecourse, we obviously pulled that at the start of this council term and no longer have it as a fundraiser. So to continue to support this program, there obviously had to be some changes made, which is what this report and recommendation has done. So it's a small amount of money going towards programs, but with the council council officers' time, I think there can be some really big impacts. So I'm looking forward to see how it goes for the next 4 years or for the life of the agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor say a few words? I'd just like to say a few words as well. I've always supported East Timor, as Councillor Cusack could attest to. Right from when we first got on the council, this was one of the biggest things on council back in 2004, wasn't that right, Councillor? And look, and as much as what you said about gambling reforms and everything, but the majority of the great work that this council did for Liquorsar actually came from the race day. And it wasn't like we were encouraging gambling. It was actually we were doing it for a benefit, and it didn't cost the ratepayers any money out of this. And I personally would like to see the race day come back as a way of saying thank you, and as a way of actually not using taxpayers' money, but actually creating money. So, Councillor Cusack, would you like to close?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of quick observations. The policy that we have in front of us has been developed through extensive consultation with a number of people who are very experienced in this area, and they have the political aspect of it through the East Timorese consul here in Victoria, also through the East Timorese partnership networks, the state government program director International Department of the Program Director International from the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, local government, and we've also have a number of connections with the VUT and through Dr. Bob Brown, and feedback from various other stakeholders. The opportunities in front of us are quite extraordinary. There's a couple of examples given in the summary of the paper we have in front of us, and one is around using the NGO, the Expand, to purchase carbon credits, and the other one is to look at the With One Seed program. Both of these projects have an interesting connection. If you understand and appreciate the environments and the types of property, land that is available up on the equatorial belt, you often know, or you should know, that volcanic islands have very limited soil, and the East Timorese only form of fuel is to chop down what exists in terms of timber, and we've got to get away from that, and you've got to replace that, because topsoil just disappears, all you've got is rock, and you can't be sustainable. So these are projects that have long-term benefits to that community, and as I said, we have always had a reciprocal thing. We have recently had people out from East Timor to visit council, to learn from council, and those are the sorts of things we might be able to maintain.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously.
Thank you.
Council Report 9.8 tonight's injuries on page 129 and relates to a special charge scheme for a right-of-way in Tennyson Street, Essendon. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Sharp.
Sorry, I just need clarification on something then. Happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Councillor Gauci-Murici. Councillor Sharp, would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, this matter has been going on for quite a number of years now, and from our most recent discussions that I have with residents and officers, council is because of the way the drainage point is connected to the ROW, council it's considered excessive, so council will contribute to the works for this ROW, which of course is of great benefit to the residents. So I was glad that we were able to get that part of it sorted. But the crux of it is that when it's heavy or when it rains, a number of properties down there flood, particularly when it's the 100 year flood. It's not good at all down there, so the residents have been agitating for this to happen for quite some time. I will note that there has been some dissension as well. It's certainly not 10 out of 10 people that want this done. So this recommendation is to take the report further by way of having a special committee formed where ward councillors will hear from submitters, so residents, should they wish to speak to us directly about it. So there is, I would like to hear directly again from residents, I guess, because we had 4 say yes to progressing this matter and 4 non-responses. So I think the best way forward, considering it's been going on for so long, is to progress this to the special meeting, and then we can hear it as ward councillors, hear the submissions, and then take from there and see if there is, well, hope there is the majority support for the works to be done, because it does need to be settled.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gauci-Marici.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just briefly, just as Councillor Sharp mentioned, of the 14 residents, 5 said yes, 5 said no, and 4 didn't respond at all. So whilst 50% is a pass in an exam, it's still important for us to be able to understand whether there is support for it or not. And the committee gives us the opportunity to seek that feedback before confirming our decision. Given this was one of the very first matters we debated when I was first elected to council, I look forward to seeing the end of it either way. So,
thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And just to reiterate, being another ward councillor for Buckley Ward, this has been a very long and I believe has been going on for some time prior to even myself or Councillor Gauci-Marici becoming a councillor, and no doubt previous ward councillors have had this issue debated over and over with local residents. I think without putting too much pressure on the local residents, because not everybody has got the resources to come up with the money to cover these type of issues, but if there could be some consensus amongst the residents that back onto that ROW, then it would be a great thing that somewhere along the way, however it turns out, that we can come up with a solution to a vexing problem that is caused by obviously water rushing down, and we just need to get it sorted and get it sorted quickly.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Nation.
Thank you, Mayor. Just first of all, point of clarification through the Chair. On page 131, the final sentence states 10 responses have been received, of which 4, in brackets 5, were in support. Is it 4 or is it 5? Because it says 4, but it has a 5 in brackets.
Madam, Mr Mayor, it is 5. It is just 5. A correction to the report.
Thank you. Look, even on that point, and totally acknowledging that this is something that needs to be done, and taking guidance from ward councillors, we did resolve on the 26th of April 2017 that council only proceed with a special charge scheme if there is majority of support from property owners. 5 out of 14 is not majority support. 5 out of 10 is not majority support. You need a half plus 1. So I just question if this is the correct step based on that previous resolution of council. I don't need an answer to that, but I just think if we've resolved that we will only proceed if there is a majority of support, 5 and 10 is still not...
So, Councillor, are you asking for clarification?
No, I'm just stating that I won't be supporting it because we do have an outstanding resolution which states majority support, and there was not majority support.
Just for my clarification, the people that don't vote, is that considered a positive or a negative vote?
Through you, Mr Mayor, it's broadly considered positive, although as officers we would always caution councillors that we're not 100% sure that people will have read and understood the documentation, and hence the benefit in this instance that we are going just one step down the process. We are not committing anybody to expenditure of funds at this stage.
Okay. Any other councillor like to say a few words?
Sorry, just a point of clarification. So it goes to the ward councillors, but will it then come back to council again?
Through you, Mr Mayor, it was not the intent to bring it back through the chamber, although that could occur if it was deemed appropriate.
Sorry, through you, Mr Mayor, would the mover and seconder potentially put that in as an additional dot point? Well, I think we need an extra dot point to ensure there's a majority support.
So
I'm happy to foreshadow a motion.
Foreshadow a motion. Okay. All right. I'll accept the foreshadowed motion.
Can I just add a point? I'm happy to add a point 7.
You happy to add a point 7?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I'll word it.
Okay.
Bring a report
okay. Well,
back
Councillor, someone needs to move an amendment to your motion. So,
Mr Mayor, I'm happy to move a formal amendment, point 7.
Yep.
Being that a further report comes back to council following the section. What's the meeting called? The Special Committee of Council. You have it up on the screen. For the final decision. Can I see how that's written, please?
Could I just have clarity, Mr Mayor?
Sure.
If we don't have a majority, as Councillor Nation points out, of residents in favour of this, there's no need to bring it back to council, is that right?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I guess the contention here lies with the definition of majority, and there's clearly a degree of discomfort from some of the councillors about what constitutes a majority. In the sense that it does 50%, should there be 50%, it could be agreed that it must be 51%, for example, to constitute a majority. That could form part of the resolution, which would then allow it to move through at that point.
Thank you for that. So is that all, Councillor Lawrence?
Well, if I think we need clarity on that as ward councillors to know exactly what is a majority.
Point of clarification, a majority is greater than half. So 50% is not a majority. Google it, look it up in the Oxford. Greater than
Mayor,
half.
just back to meeting procedures, we're still trying to get this formal amendment. If we can just get that up and then we can debate the amendment.
Exactly. So we're right, Kate?
For a final decision.
Mr Mayor, if I could just have clarity again, because if we put this amendment in, it's basing it on a final decision. So it's saying to bring it back to council based on the final decision. But if the final decision is not a majority, then it should not come back to council.
Through you, Mr Mayor, that's correct. The contention would be that if we had 50% and, for example, a number of people hadn't responded and that was deemed to be in favour, I'm just moving with the concerns of the councillors in the chamber. We certainly won't be bringing it back if we don't have a majority.
So we're putting the horse before the cart, or just?
Okay.
I think we're getting.
I'm not debating. I'm not debating the issue. I'm just debating whether this amendment is clear. I'm not debating anything. I'm just wanting clarity on.
Thanks.
What's going on.
At the end of the amendment, should there be majority support of all respondents?
It's your amendment.
Thank you. I'll leave it at that.
All right. So does the mover and the seconder accept?
We haven't got a seconder.
Oh, we haven't got a seconder. Okay.
We haven't got a seconder to the amendment.
All right, do we have a seconder to the amendment? As we don't have a seconder to the amendment, so no one's going to second the amendment?
No.
Okay.
I'm happy to...
Councillor Cusack will second the amendment. So does the mover accept the amendment?
No, we have to put the amendment to the vote.
Okay, we'll put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour of the amendment? All those against? So we have... Yep.
Those in favour are Councillor Sharp, Councillor Sypick, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Cusack, Councillor Gacci-Marici. Those against, Councillor Lawrence and Councillor Nation.
I'm sorry, I didn't vote then.
Oh, okay.
So Councillor Lawrence has abstained.
Okay, so the amendment is now the motion. So, Councillor Sharp, you speak again, yes.
Oh, I don't need to speak again. It's all good.
Okay, now do I need a seconder for this?
It's been seconded by Councillor.
Okay. So, Councillor Lawrence, would you like to speak to the item?
Councillor Lawrence.
I didn't second the item.
The amendment's been put and carried. We're now moving to the substantive motion. The speakers thus far have been Councillor Sharp, Councillor Gacci-Marici, Councillor Lawrence and Councillor Nation.
Okay.
Have spoken.
All right. Would anybody else? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you. Considering I moved the amendment, I suppose I probably should put in a few words. I completely understand where Councillor Nation is coming from, and it doesn't sit. It didn't sit great with me that the wording that the council only proceed with special charges scheme if there's a majority of support from the property owners after issuing the revised questionnaire. Unfortunately, whilst we know what a majority is, because we have 4 non-respondents and it's deemed that they're probably a yes, but we don't really know, it makes it very difficult. So it's sort of with a 50-50 decision. That's why we put in point 7, and hopefully after the special committee meeting we'll have more answers. We don't have to go ahead with this because obviously we want to make sure we're doing the right thing by the majority of the residents, and yes, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillor to say a few words? Councillor Cusack.
Well, an issue like this, while we might play with the semantics of it, as we have about the last few minutes, the reality is we've still got water going down a right-of-way flooding people's houses, which to me creates a risk for council and all ratepayers if it can be shown that we were tardy in making some sort of decision, or not tardy, but not able to make a decision about something as practical as how do you get rid of the water. Now, a solution may come up through this process. I don't know. Maybe there might be a resident who dreams up some sort of brand new trick that sorts things out. I fully appreciate why certain residents who aren't affected by the water are loath to put their hand in their pocket. But at the end of the day, if they don't put their hand in their pocket, they're also connected to the fact that this blasted water runs down the hill from their place. And so they are joined in the issue. And so somewhere along the line, trying to find a solution is a really worthwhile thing. Putting this committee together, seeking further comment from residents, maybe getting some clarification about what could be done or might not be done. If there are people who are concerned about the money and how they can, whether they can afford it or whatever, is there a way that council can consider their way around that, or consider its way around that, and engage people? These are matters for that committee to think and talk about. And if there is a report to come back to council, if a decision is able to be made, let's entertain that rather than keep on guessing and hoping that we're going to get something right.
Thank you. Councillor Sharp, would you like to close? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carry unanimously. Oh, sorry, I can't see it. All those in favour?
Councillor Sharp, Councillor Sypick, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Cusack, Councillor Gacci-Marici, Councillor Lawrence.
All those against?
This is Councillor Nation.
Thank you. Next item on tonight's agenda is notice of motion. Councillors, do we have any notices of motion tonight? No. Urgent business. Councillors, do we have any urgent business tonight? No. Confidential reports. The next item of business is a confidential report, and councillors, we have one confidential report. So, councillors, do I have a motion that the meeting be closed to the public to consider the matter which contains information relating to other matters? Councillor Lawrence, Councillor Byrne. Councillors, I'll just go straight to the vote. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Ladies and gentlemen of the gallery and of our live streaming audience, that concludes tonight's council meeting, and thank you for your participation, and we look forward to seeing you again at the public forum next Tuesday night. Good evening and God bless.